Now we've got the U.S. Senator from the state of Georgia, Reverend Raphael Warnock. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Great to be here with you, Brian.
Now, you were there questioning RFK Jr. in the Finance Committee. There was one exchange that I thought was especially telling. Here's a clip of that exchange.
Mr. Kennedy, you have compared the CDC's work to Nazi death camps. You've compared it to sexual abusers in the Catholic Church. You've also said that many of them belong, this is a direct quote, many of them belong in jail. For me, those are disturbing characterizations of the CDC workers that I know who are trying to keep the American public safe every single day. And as you are presented as the nominee for this position, I need to know, do you stand by those statements that you made in the past, or do you retract those previous statements?
Senator, I don't believe that I ever compared the CDC to Nazi death camps. I support the CDC. My job is not to dismantle or harm the CDC. My job is to empower the scientists if I'm privileged to be confirmed.
So you retract those statements?
I'm not retracting it. I never said it.
Well, actually, I have a transcript
of me saying that it's a Nazi death camp.
Yeah, let me read your words. It says that the institution CDC and the vaccine program, is your description of their work, is more important than the children that it's supposed to protect. And you know, it's the same reason we had a pedophile scandal in the Catholic Church. It's because people were able to convince themselves that the institution of the church was more important than these little boys and girls who were being raped. That's pretty provocative language. You said in another statement to me, this is like Nazi death camp. I mean, let me finish. I'm just reading your words. I mean, what happened to these kids? 1 in 31 boys in this country, their minds are being robbed from them.
Yeah, I was not comparing the CDC to Nazi death camps. I was comparing the injury rate to our children to other atrocities.
So you asked about his comparison of the CDC to Nazi death camps. He denies it. You show the receipts. Senator, there's a general sense of impunity among Trump's nominees for lying or misrepresenting the truth during these confirmation hearings. Can I have your reaction to that?
Well, what I can say to you is that, look, the selection of the Secretary for Health and Human Services is serious business. It's literally a matter of life and death. We can't play around with this kind of thing. And so, you know, my question wasn't a trick question. I wanted to state for the record, where is he? And it's quite provocative for someone to use the CDC in the same statement talking about Nazi death camps. And he tried to suggest that somehow his words had been taken out of context. Look at the transcript. It speaks for itself.
You announced that you would be voting against RFK Jr., and so his former running mate, Nicole Shanahan, took to Twitter and responded to you, your tweet. And she wrote, "Man, do I regret ever helping you. The only reason that you're in that seat is because I sent massive financial support to Shirley Sherrod's C4 to mobilize rural Georgia during the 2020 runoff. I'll be correcting that massive mistake here ASAP. You're awful." Can I have your response to what I view as the oligarchic bent of today's GOP, where these wealthy donors have decided that they and they alone are just the general arbiters of who can and can't be in office?
It sounds like she thinks she purchased my seat. I beg to differ. The people of Georgia elected me in a historic election. In fact, they voted for me 5 times in less than 3 years. So I'm very clear about who I represent. I represent the people of Georgia and their interests. In my state, the CDC is a crown jewel focused on protecting the American public against disease, against the next pandemic. We've got some 10,000 employees who do incredible work every single day. And they deserve a leader at the CDC who's not a dilettante, who's not a conspiracy theorist, but someone who will be focused on their health, their well-being, and I'll be focused on them.
Do you have any worry that when you see folks like RFK Jr., who may very well be confirmed as HHS secretary, when you see other folks who demonize the very agencies that they're setting out to run. And these, to your exact point, are situations where it's life or death for Americans. I mean, Health and Human Services is literally life or death for Americans. When you have the transportation sector, for example, and you have a commercial jet colliding with a military helicopter for the first time in decades, this again is life or death. And when you have people in these agencies or atop these positions who are hostile to the very agency that they're seeking to lead, does that worry you about, does that portend something grim about what we're about to see as we move forward into the Trump administration, beyond even the crash that we just saw in the last 24 hours?
Well, many of these nominees worry me, but I came to this process of advise and consent, which is my obligation as a United States Senator, with an open mind. There are some of these nominees that I'm open to voting for. I've met with every last one of them who's asked for a meeting with me. But I'm going to take seriously my role of advise and consent to make sure that we've got the best people we can get, given who this administration is, to fill these seats. And I think in a real sense, Brian, the onus of this moment really is not on the Democrats, it's on the Republicans. I think it's so very important that people understand that even when you have the worst nominee, take this defense secretary debacle that just went down. Even if you get every last Democrat to vote no, we can't stop a single one of these nominees. No matter how unified we are, it's just plain math. We've got to have a handful of Republicans who will choose nation over party, who will choose the people over some partisan advantage, who will understand that they work for the people of America, the people of their respective states, and not for someone who wants to be a king. That's the moral decision that sits in front of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And I pray to God, for the sake of our country, that they will find the backbone and the moral courage to make the right decision.
To that point,
so far I haven't seen any evidence of that.
To that point, it's clear what they should do. Do you have any indication whether any of these senators will defer to doing what's right versus just blindly offering loyalty to Donald Trump, in the sense that he put these people forward, he expects fealty, and expects that the senators in the Republican Party are going to give that to him?
Well, and that's a fundamental violation of both the substance and the spirit of the American experiment. And in this moment, it's really on all of us to stand up. You know, we have three co-equal branches of government. We don't have a king. And I think we're seeing in real time that elections do have consequences. Donald Trump said he wanted to be a dictator on day one. People didn't believe him. I think you should believe him. He indicated that, you know, he seems to think that he doesn't have to follow the law. You see it in these executive orders that were passed the very first day. I mean, think about it. On the very first day of office, before he had slept one night in the White House, he pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists who literally bludgeoned and, in some instances, killed law enforcement officers, tried to disenfranchise millions of voters across our country by disrupting the nonviolent transfer of power. In a real sense, we should see that there's not much distinction between what happened the first week and what happened the second week. That this effort to basically say to every federal employee, regardless of skill, expertise, and experience, we'd rather you resign, and then this effort to literally pull back monies that Congress has already appropriated.
Yeah.
Let's be really clear what you're witnessing. you're witnessing the administrative manifestation of January 6th. This is an attack on the democracy itself. And it is a time for every American, whether you're in office or not, to stand up and say that the republic belongs to the people. You don't own it, you can't buy it, and you can't buy it out.
Prior to our recording this interview, going back to the tragic crash that happened in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump took to the podium and immediately started blaming diversity, blaming DEI. He also blamed Democrats. He blamed Joe Biden. He blamed Pete Buttigieg. He blamed the 2020 election. But the crux of what he was blaming was the very concept of diversity. Can I have your reaction to him failing to accept any responsibility for his own government and instead trying to vilify as a boogeyman the very concept of diversity and, more specifically, brown and black people?
I've not seen a worse response from a president in the wake of an awful tragedy. One of the roles of that office and its sacred trust is consoler in chief. In the course of a presidency, tragedies are bound to happen. That's the nature of life. And whether it's a terrible accident like what we saw last night, or a horrific school shooting, which we see too many of, people expect their president to show up on the scene and certainly insist that government finds out what happened here. And that's our work, and get to the bottom of it. But to take a beat and to take a moment and to comfort those who are directly impacted and the nation itself. I know a little something about this because long before I came to the Senate, I was and am a pastor. I've been with families as they've had to confront the unthinkable in their worst tragedies. And I can tell you, not just as a member of the Senate, but as a pastor, that for Donald Trump to pile on his politics and his bigoted agenda on top of the pain that these families are already feeling is way beyond the pale. How about take a moment and express with some real depth the pain that people are feeling in this moment. And then let's get to the bottom of this, that he would use this moment when bodies are still literally on the bottom of the Potomac and families are being notified, that he would use this moment to advance his agenda of attacking DEI and attacking Democrats speaks volumes. And not only is it shameful, quite frankly, it's dangerous. The reason why we have the safest aviation system in the world is because all prior presidents, Democrats and Republicans, have left politics out of this kind of investigation. He should do the same.
I want to take kind of a step back and take this to more of a 30,000-foot view. The right, it feels, for as long as I've been paying attention to politics, has operated with a monopoly, an effective monopoly on Christianity in this country. And yet, right now, they're engaged in what I would consider deeply unchristian behavior. But that's something that you can obviously speak on much better than I can. So what is your reaction to seeing a party that, on one hand, beats its chest as the party of Christian values, whose first acts in office right now are to strip away grants that fund Medicaid, to feed low-income folks and sick folks and older folks, Meals on Wheels, programs to serve homeless veterans, and effectively to rip apart families in service of these mass deportations, which are very much not only for criminals as was promised.
People's religious claims are just that. They are their religious claims. I won't speak to that, but I will tell you that their policies bear false witness against the God I know. I'm a Matthew 25 Christian. Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was sick and I was in prison and you visited me. I was a stranger, that is an immigrant, and you welcomed me. And the scripture says, some will ask, Lord, when were you hungry? When were you a stranger, an immigrant? When were you in prison? When were you sick and needed health care? And the answer came, in as much as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it also unto me. And so that is my litmus test for one's faith. The depth of one's faith, I think the litmus test for one's faith is the depth of your commitment to the poor, the marginalized. That's the gospel that I read, not only in the New Testament, it is the spirit of the prophets. Micah, who said, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good and what does the Lord require, but that you do justice, love mercy or kindness, and walk humbly. Imagine that, walk humbly with your God. And so many of the politicians in the public square today suffer from what Martin Luther King Jr. used to call a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds. In other words, their walk doesn't match their talk,
Right.
And their policy doesn't line up with their faith claims. And in a moment like this, I think we ought to be centering human dignity. My faith guides me in my work every single day. But I don't use my faith, by the way, to lord it over other people who have other faith traditions or who claim no faith at all. Because when I talk about justice, mercy, compassion, love, empathy, faithfulness, kindness, humility, those are the values of my faith. That's what informs my work, not the doctrines. I don't try to impose that on all 11 million people that I represent in Georgia. But those values, I think, are resonant in all of the great faith traditions and those who claim no particular faith tradition at all. I love this American experiment where we have the freedom of religion, but we're not a theocracy. And I can tell you this pastor who is profoundly and deeply committed to my faith has no interest in living in a theocracy, Muslim, Jewish, or Christian. I love this grand American experiment where you have the freedom to express your faith, you respect the traditions of others, those who claim no faith tradition. And I think the great experiment, the great test of our faith is our ability to make all of that happen. We live in our faith, we live under the law, and I pray for the day when we'll learn to live with one another.
Well, that's the perfect place to leave off. I appreciate the inspiring words here. I know my audience does too. Senator Warnock, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Great to be with you. Keep the faith.